So, if you want to just tell us your name and how you got into the field.
Okay. My name is Sharon Gallagher-FishBaugh, and I've been teaching for 32 years. I taught special education
Sweet.
and elementary education, second grade. And I got into teaching because I had a little neighbor girl of mine who was many years younger than I am. Her name was Keisha. She was Down syndrome. And we were very, very dear friends, and I learned a lot from Keisha. And for many, many years, I was her teacher, and she was my teacher in a lot of ways. I learned a great deal from her. But the wonderful thing about it was that our friendship allowed me to realize the potential of all children. And unfortunately, I had gone away to school and came back to learn that she had passed away, and it devastated me. But it became my mission to dedicate my life to kids.
Was that due to medical issues?
Yes. Yes. So it was very heartbreaking. But I came to be in this position after being named the Utah Teacher of the Year for 2009, and traveling the country, seeing what was happening with our profession and seeing what was happening in terms of our students. I wanted to have a bigger platform and a bigger stage to make a difference for kids and teachers.
Cool.
So that's why I'm here.
So a little bit of what we're doing in class right now is we're doing a project on funding, and some of the issues that have arose were topics such as standardized tests, and if schools do well with testing, they get more funding. But also, as you probably know, with special ed, they all have to take the same standardized tests and CRTs and state to state, all differs. And I mean, as someone going into the field, I don't find that very fair. Do you have an opinion or a stance on that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think what No Child Left Behind did 10 years ago was it gave us an opportunity to really have access to some information and some data based on subgroups. So we were able to look at it within an existing school. What are some of how are our economically disadvantaged children doing? How are our special ed kids doing? And so in that regard, I think that legislation was the impetus for us to really delve inwards and look at ourselves. But the research out there shows there is absolutely not a direct correlation between students' achievement on test scores and being the sole indicating factor in terms of rewarding a teacher or penalizing a teacher. So we are opposed to basing pay on test scores. We feel that we need to have multiple measures. Teaching's a complex field.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This is not something that is good practice, or nor does the research uphold it as being an efficient model for improving student learning.
So, kind of on the same lines, is there any funding, private funding, or state funding that kind of supports that theory in which?
Well, there's much legislation that's come down.
Right.
The American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. Yeah. We have 7 schools currently in Utah that have received grant money specifically targeted towards student test scores. They're school improvement grant recipients. We've seen that more in the last 10 years than we have ever. But most of the funding source for public education comes from property taxes, federal dollars, Title I monies to target special ed and at-risk schools. As far as legislation that we've seen this last session, yes, there's a great push towards tying funding sources to test scores. We've seen that happen with Race to the Top across the country. Right. That again was from the ARA monies and the ESEA. Now they're in the throes of reauthorizing that and recognizing that the goal of 100% proficiency for all students is an unrealistic goal because we're dealing with human beings. And so I think we're hopeful, as they're now in the throes of discussing that reauthorization, that will be changed. So.
We actually just learned about that in class. They wanted 100%.
Yes.
I thought that was
They don't ask teachers, which is part of the problem. And you know, we have ourselves to blame for that, because really and truly every decision that's made that affects our classrooms is made from someone who's not in education. It's made at the policy level. And so we have got to become the experts and be willing to govern and take charge of our profession.
What do you think we can do as future educators and you as an educator to share with the public how we can promote funding and raise more money, whether it's for schools, for teacher pay, for more programs for students in special ed, ESL. Yeah, it just seems like there's not a lot of funding, and especially in Utah, there needs to be.
Right. They call that the Utah paradox.
Yeah.
You know, we have so many children. I think what I've discovered, you know, public education funding is very complex.
Right.
In fact, we did a training for our new legislators this past session on Public Education Funding 101. And what we also know is that the public, poll after poll shows that they are willing to spend more money in taxes, increased taxes, if they know that that tax dollar is going to go directly to classrooms and directly to teachers. The political will right now on Capitol Hill is that raising taxes would sidetrack our economy. So there's not the political will to do it, even though the general public in Utah recognizes that that's something they want to invest in. So as future educators and as teachers now, we have a responsibility, and indeed it is our obligation to educate our parents and our average citizens about what we're facing and ways that we can make a difference in terms of funding for our students here in Utah. What we don't have in Utah is a broad-based, fair, stable funding source.
Right.
We're pulling off of property taxes, and that needs to be broadened, and there needs to be a fair distribution of that taxation.
Yep.
And you know, the number one economic development tool is a good education system. We were in a meeting last week where a high-tech firm said they would never come to Utah because of class sizes and the low salaries for their teachers. And in order to attract business and industry and spur the economy, you need to have a world-class education system to prepare for the workforce of the 21st century.
Definitely. So, well, on the taxation, what is the idea that taxing things such as tobacco products and alcohol tax, and I'm not quite sure if all the other things that they could tax, but is that the idea?
Well, I think that's something that we'd have to really explore. Those have certainly been some options that have been proposed, you know, taxing our sin tax is what it's referred to. However, that is not a tax burden that's being shared by a great percentage of people, especially in Utah. It does bring in revenue. Right. But it's not a tax that we can count on that's stable, and it's going to, you know, be a progressive kind of tax where we are going to see an increase as enrollment increases. So there's some issues.
So politically speaking, there's not a lot of funding, or as much as I think teachers would like for a lot of their students. Do you think? Since politics does have such a huge role in funding and how schools work, has there been any opportunities for those politics who are in charge of the legislature and whatnot to actually go into schools and see how they work and how, in many instances, they're inefficient?
Boy, I think that is really the question of the day.
Right.
What I discovered, this is my first ledge session, 45 days up there, is that there is really a lack of knowledge about what's going on that's great in our public schools and what it's really like to be in a public school. Yeah. Repeated offers have been made for our representatives on Capitol Hill to come and spend some time in our classrooms. Yeah. I hear over and over again that our public schools aren't innovative. Well, I taught in a school that had e-mints that did project-based learning that was... There really is a lack of knowledge about what's going on. So yes, the opportunities should be there, and I actually think it should be a requirement of our legislators to come into public schools at all different areas, rural, urban, you know, Title I, affluent, to see what's really going on.
That's all.